Welcome to those who are joining. We're going to give just another minute or so to make sure everybody who's coming can have their computer connect. So we will start in just 1 minute, but thank you for being here.
While we're waiting for folks to join, if you want to type into the chat where you're coming in from. So I would put in, from Massachusetts, if you want to share with us your role. Maybe you just finished school and you're celebrating, or it's your last couple days. Feel free to type into the chat and just make sure your chat says panelists and attendees so everyone can see where you're zooming in from. Got East Coast and West Coast represented. 2 more days. Congratulations.
Oh, we've got Mexico represented.
Oh, yeah, nice. Welcome.
Well, as you continue to introduce or tell us where you're coming from, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Carrie O'Grady, and I'm a full-time consultant and coach for the Responsive Classroom Approach, which means I get to go to many different schools and school districts to partner with schools to help schools bring responsive classroom into their learning. I have had the pleasure of going to 45 states. Last week was state 45, which was Montana. So I got to check another one off. Nice. And 22 countries sharing the responsive classroom approach. And I've been able to work with these 2 leaders, Tina and Jerome, who are with us that I'm going to introduce shortly. But I'm also here with my colleague, Kristen Vincent, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My role with the webinar tonight is to support Carrie and our panelists and all of you, our attendees who are joining us tonight. In this Zoom format, we cannot see you, but we know that you're there, and we can use the chat feature and the Q&A feature to communicate. And I just want to explain the difference, how we'll use them. The chat, which some of you have already found and are sharing with us where you're logging in from, that's for us to make positive comments during the webinar. If you want to show agreement with something that one of the panelists is saying, if you have your own experience to share, and just make sure the chat is set to panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comments and kind of feed off your energy there. But the chat sometimes scrolls by really quickly. So if you have any questions about the format of the webinar, any questions about the content, or you have a question for a panelist, you can use the Q&A feature. And as questions pop up in there, if I have an answer for you, I will type the answer back. And if you have a question for the panelist, I'll just hold on to it till we get towards the end of the webinar. I just want to let all of you know that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email in a day or 2 containing a link to the recording of this webinar. And the recording will be posted on the Responsive Classroom YouTube channel in the next few days. So I'm going to turn my camera off for now so I can help out behind the scenes, and I'm going to turn it back over to Carrie.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for being here. So as I mentioned, I have 2 school leaders with me that are here to share about responsive classroom and leadership and what they have learned about being a leader in this past amazing year that we've had, and how they use responsive classroom to support this year. And so I'm going to ask that our panelists introduce themselves. And Tina, do you mind starting us off?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Tina Miller, and I come to you from central Wisconsin, so the smack dab center of the state, about 5 hours north of Chicago. And I'm an elementary principal here in Wisconsin, and I've been a principal for only 5 years. So I've really tried to learn and embrace that leadership role and balancing it with responsive classroom. And my school is Howe Elementary School, and we have 300 students. So we're a kindergarten through 5th grade school, 300 students. We also qualify as a school-wide Title I due to our free and reduced lunch rate. So we have 74% of our students at that free and reduced lunch. rate as well. And that school-wide Title I status is just a benefit for us to have that extra training and time together to learn and practice all of those best practices that we know, and responsive classroom is such a key part of that as well. When I came to house school, it was very strongly entrenched with PBIS. And I'm very much living, breathing, responsive classroom, right? So I've had to try to take that good foundation of PBIS and mirror that together with RC, responsive classroom. And so we've designed a positive behavior approach, PBA. So what we're trying to do is take that good tenets and foundation and keep us moving forward with those clear, high expectations and all of our practices too. Just with responsive classroom, in our whole district, we've had quite a lot of training and experience with responsive classroom. And I actually have the benefit of being a consulting teacher. So for 15 years, I've been able to teach and lead responsive classroom workshops during the summer. So it's definitely woven into the fabric of my being.
Thanks, Tina. And of course, I know you're not good. I should have told you beforehand. Tina was recognized this year. Tell us about that.
I'm humbled and honored, but I was selected as the Wisconsin Elementary Principal of the Year. So I'm still just kind of, I don't know, it's amazing, but I know that it's just the support, and it's that team that surrounds you, right? It's not that one person, it's all of us working together to weave that fabric of a school. So very blessed.
Yeah, and it's your big heart and great leadership too.
Thank you.
Jerome, would you mind taking a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. So after that introduction, I feel like the antithesis of Tina here. So this is actually our inaugural year as a school. This is our first year. We are a K-12 charter school. We opened this year, of all years, to have an inaugural year. We opened up K-4, and we add a grade every year. So right now we're in the building preparing for our first year with a 5th grade, and we'll add a grade every year until 2028 when we have our full K-12 model. This is also my first year as a school lead. I have a very non-traditional, I guess, background in terms of coming into school lead. Formerly a college professor that started helping and doing different things at the high school level, ended up with a high school level job with the governor's school here in our state, and just saw the disparity that we had in our education here in South Carolina is where I am, and had the crazy idea of starting a charter school to help fix the problem and address some of these systemic issues that we're seeing. So that process, that journey for me started about 3 or 4 years ago. We got approved as a school maybe a couple of years ago, 2 Aprils ago. And then again, this was our inaugural year. So going back to that antithesis part, when you talk about having RC kind of woven into your DNA, we don't have any DNA quite yet, right? Like we're putting it all together this year. So the positive side of that is creating something new, where foundationally everything that we do is based on responsive classroom. So when you create a new school, we always talk about hitting that reset button, and we got to hit the reset button, not just with our scholars in the building and with our families in terms of expectations for what a school family partnership should be, but also for our teachers. So, you have all these individuals coming in from previous situations and different traditional education models to all come together and say, okay, this from its very beginning, from its premise will be different. Has been advantageous, to say the least. So we're all growing together in our responsive classroomness, if you will.
Jerome, I was really impressed with your school mission and why you wanted to start and how you wanted to help your community. Can you tell us a little bit more about your school mission?
Sure. So the mission statement, I feel like I'm being quizzed here. Let's see if I get it right. Is to create an enthusiastic culture of learning by emphasizing the social, emotional development and character of our scholars, our families, and our staff. And then we realized that by emphasizing those social, emotional components. So the reason that's there is to give you a little bit more background from where I came from prior to being school lead here. My task, I came to South Carolina from New York by way of Atlanta and Virginia. because of an opportunity to create a program at the high school level. I live in a one high school town, and there's not a lot of opportunity that comes to this town in terms of academic opportunities. So I was tasked with creating high level opportunities for our kids who otherwise, like the top 5 or 10% would be in this holding pattern, right? Until they got to college. So in doing that, the disparity was that none of my students look like me, right? And it brought to light the fact that South Carolina is the caricature that many people probably imagine of the South. It was a very segregated school, segregated not only on the race line, but on the socioeconomic division as well. And there was no movement in terms of just creating new systems to where we could have the same level of expectation for all scholars. So I worked for about 10 years to try to create that within the system here, and then realized it just wasn't working. So got some people who were in favor of making big change here, and they backed our school, and here we are. I'm actually in the school right now. So it's been an exciting journey to bring this opportunity to our county. This is the first time in our county's history that school choice has been offered. A little bit of background, our county desegregated by federal mandate in the early 90s. So that gives you a picture of how divided our town is in so many different ways. So it's been refreshing to, as I recruit individuals from different states, for them to come here and actually say things like, your campus is the only place where I see people actually coming together. It's not a great thing, you know, in the bigger scheme of things, but it means that we're headed in the right direction.
You're making that change happen for your town. Thank you for both introducing and telling a little bit about your experience and your background. Tell us about this past year. What did your model look like? What changes did you have? What did the teaching look like this year? Tina, do you mind starting us off?
You bet. So in the state of Wisconsin, each district had some choice in our local control over were we going to be in person or virtual. So in Wisconsin Rapids, we had the elementary schools starting day one in person, and we were 5 days a week in person. So all last summer, my elementary colleagues, we have 7 elementary schools in our district, we worked so hard trying to find those mitigation strategies and having clear procedures, because we know that students and our staff are going to feel more comfortable when we have clearly laid out plans. You're flying the plane while you build it was our motto, jokingly. So 5 days a week in person, but really thinking about, wow, we had to do things so differently. One of my main things that we talked about and did was just using more of the video and the technology tools than we ever had in the past. So I started with video morning announcements, and every single day I would use Flipgrid and create my video morning announcements. And what that allowed is for students and staff to put that into their morning when it fit well within their morning time frame. That's something that they're saying, oh, Mrs. Miller, do that again, do that some more next year. I would always use the 3 W's, wash your hands, wear your mask, and watch your distance. So much so that the kids would look at me and they'd say the 3 W's, and they'd know it. It just becomes such wording that we wouldn't even have imagined becomes such a player in our, in our days as well. Some other things we really had to do is be thoughtful about how are we going to ensure that spacing in those common areas, right? So in the classroom, we can separate the desks and the tables and things, but a lot of tape was on the floor to separate out our students as they're waiting in line, talking about going down the stairs. Our school is a 2-floor building. So, kids would like to zip down the stairs and keeping them, adequately spaced as well. So you'll see a lot of different tape marks on the floor as the year progressed as well. One of the best benefits, though, I'd say from our model being in person, but doing it in a very safe way, was our longer lunchtime. And I'm going to speak a lot tonight with you guys just about those common areas as well. So our district, I was so thankful, allowed us just even an extra 20 minutes of lunchtime so that we could have one grade level in there at a time. And it just gave such a respectful, peaceful, calm time. And we had everybody spaced out. And I said, there you go, because my lunchroom was very active. and a little noisy. And this really helped. I want them to have a great lunchtime, but this just kind of brought that volume down with it as well. The last thing I would just add is with our classrooms, we called them a cohort, within that classroom. And if one got sick, the whole class got quarantined. We didn't have to do that very often, which we're very thankful for. But when we had that idea of if one gets sick, we're just all on quarantine, then we could kind of relax that separation in the classroom where we started the year very much, try to get as much feed as we could in between them all. It kind of relaxed as the year went on as well.
Thanks for sharing, Tina. Jerome, tell us about what your year looked like.
Oh, very similar in that we were actually face-to-face since the first day of school. We are a year-round school, so we actually opened in mid-July. So yeah, it's quite the peak time, and it was a little crazy because, well, a lot crazy, I guess, but it was particularly crazy because as a new school, everyone else was really still focused on closing out the previous year in May and June. So there wasn't much thought or conversation about how we're going to reopen. That conversation happened very late in our state. So we just had to kind of figure things out on our own without much guidance from the state or the district level, to the point where the week before we opened is when the governor finally came out with some guidelines, which actually contradicted the things that we came up with on our own. So it got a little sticky for a minute, but we did get through the year in a face-to-face format. Similarly to Tina, we operated in a cohort fashion. We had the added bonus of the fact that our building is a renovated shopping plaza. And because of some of the structure there, if you could imagine like having a supermarket in the middle and like the different retail spots, we kept the external doors to a lot of the buildings. So a lot of our classrooms have doors, external doors. So those scholars were able to come in and out of the building directly from their classrooms. So that was like a very convenient holdover from our supermarket days, where we were able to convince families that we're going to just keep these 20 kids together. They don't have to even see these other people in the building. And similarly, as Tina mentioned, as the year progressed, we didn't have our first positive COVID case until I think the week before Thanksgiving. And as things continued in that positive direction, we did begin to loosen our protocols.
That's who knew being a previous strip mall as a school
Yes,
would have
exactly.
its benefits.
Our greatest attribute, who knew, right? Yeah.
And it sounds great that you were able to be in person. My children go to a very large district, and we were virtual from March till March pretty much, and then hybrid after that. So it's wonderful that your students were able to have some in person. So each of your schools, both of your schools, really have embraced responsive classroom approach as a way that you want it to be. Share how responsive classroom practices helped you during this challenging year. Tina, do you mind starting us off?
Absolutely. So when I think about the responsive classroom practices, I go back to this idea of it's the developmental responsiveness, positive community, effective management, and engaging academics. So as I was preparing for this, I was just taking each one of those and I was just like, okay, what are some of those key things? So I'm going to start with the developmental responsiveness. And here's what came to light to me in that lunchroom. I walk around the lunchroom every day and I'm talking to kids and things. And I had a student that just said to me, Mrs. Miller, what does it mean to be negative? Okay, so now this is in COVID time, right? And in my mind goes to positive, negative, crabby, type of thing. And I'm just like, oh, but then I had to take a step back in that in this day and age and developmentally, this child doesn't know that being negative in a test result is actually a okay thing, that they're healthy with this too. So I had to take a step back and think, how are our youngest learners accepting this, and what are they hearing at home and what are they hearing at school too? So we just would have conversations as a staff about how are we wording things, how are we helping our children understand the severity, but also that we are doing things to keep everybody safe with that too. So that was just my developmental with Mrs. Miller, what does it mean to be negative? Mm-hmm. For management, that was our big one, right? And I kept thinking, how can we use the technology tools with us? So we created a lot of videos at the beginning of the school year, such as the parent drop-off. We had an enhanced pickup and drop-off procedure. Oh, it usually is a little chaotic, I'll be honest with you. And this is one of those things that we're going to continue doing. So we created videos. I had some of my staff's, their own children come, and we created videos and sent those out to parents ahead of time, put it on our Facebook, so that they could feel comfortable with these new strategies, and they would know that these are some of our mitigation tools and strategies that we have too. We also kept going with something called boot camp, which is just this practice. So those first few days of school, and we know the first 6 weeks are so important, but in those common shared areas, we wanted to have clear, clearly communicated expectations for our students. So we would have the day where it was structured, and by times in the classrooms just rotated through, and out at recess. So we had the lunch teachers out at recess helping them understand, we go down the slide and this is how we play those games. So I tried to do a lot of videotape recording of that as well for our students that came to us new. Then we could just press play and watch some of those as well. The positive community, I would just say empathy was the word of the year. Understanding the empathy with each other as staff and for and with our students and the families, especially some of the families that were very afraid to bring their children, but they took that step and they said, no, I want my child learning in person as well. And my last thing I would say is just engaging academics. You know, we have to, in this way of, you can't sit right next to each other and do that shared reading and all of those, you know, sharing of things. How could we be creative with it and utilize the technology tools as well? So a lot of things they would use even just in Google Docs, and they're responding to each other, reading that, you know, same passage, and then doing some chat, which they thought was pretty cool because they've got fast fingers, you know, for the chatting as well. One last thing I would say is just with the parents, I needed to know my parents, and I was so thankful that I did, so that I could have that honest conversation and get that feeling when they were fearful, and to be able to honestly say and know and use their names and really bring us together. So I feel like that's kind of one of our great pieces we're going to carry on forward, is just how this has forced us almost to become more united with the families as well.
Thanks, Tina, for sharing. Jerome, I'm thinking about, how did Responsive Classroom help you not only this year, but it was your opening year of a school. Right. So how did you find the practices help you?
So piggybacking off of something that Tina mentioned, she talked about the word of the year being empathy. So that framed essentially everything. When I think about Responsive Classroom, if I had to just put it in just a few words, I think about being connected in meaningful ways. Your scholars being connected to each other, and your teachers establishing meaningful relationships with the kids in the building, and of course with the family. So really just prioritizing that social and emotional well-being. I know we talk about morning meeting and Responsive Classroom, and I think having that as the premise of the day, I mean, it's what RC is built on, but I feel like, especially given the underlying trauma that so many people were facing, it just became vital for this to be a priority for everyone. So taking that as our foundation, and then allowing it to manifest itself into the ways that we interact with each other as the adults in the building, interact with our families. We had, in addition to morning meeting, we also have an adult circle every Wednesday. So where we connect, we kick all the kids out of the building about an hour and a half early on Wednesdays, and we meet as a staff for a non-academic meeting, where we are able to see each other in meaningful ways and support each other in this work. And that's, you know, that's good in any year, but in this year, it has meant a lot, because individuals, we've needed that connection that so many of us were missing outside of our work environment. Even though we were still pushing along in face-to-face, a lot of other components of our respective lives were still shut down. So this community just became that much more important to all the constituents involved. And we had that. And of course, we also had morning huddle every morning before school starts, from about 7:15 to 7:30. We meet all our teaching faculty meet. So using the same themes and priorities that are laid out in RC as the basis for all these adult interactions, I feel like is a big part of what pushed us through this year towards success.
Hi, Terry. I'm so glad you were able to join
Yay.
us.
So sorry.
Well, I'm just glad you're well and you were able to join us. So thank you so much.
It's been a day.
We are school leaders here, so we all understand what a day can be. We do have some, these are our fellow panelists, and we have attendees that you can't see, but they can see us because we're in a webinar format versus a meeting format. So if you would be kind enough, Terry, to take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us where you're coming from, and tell us what your year looked like, because your school situation was different than Tina and Jerome. Tina and Jerome were actually in person all year.
Wow, I'm a little jealous, actually. So I'm Terry Phillips. I am coming to you from Durham, North Carolina. We went out in COVID in 2020 when everybody else did in March. And then we thought we were going to start in person in the new school year, but it turned out we did not. We started virtually, and we didn't come back to in-person learning until March of this year. So it was a solid year without children. And some of our teachers decided to do a hybrid model where they taught, because not everyone came back. Some teachers taught a hybrid model where they taught their kids at home while teaching their kids in the classroom. Our 4th and 5th grade teachers did a hybrid departmentalized model, which was a bit of a challenge. And then I would say the biggest noticing and wondering, biggest noticing is that when we did come back, kids were so happy. And even kids who didn't come back for in-person learning, when they came back to take their end of grade tests, which not all of them did, but those who did choose to come in and take their end of grade tests, they were happy to be at school, even if they had to take a test. It was just amazing. So I hope that suffices for an introduction, Carrie.
It certainly does. And I was saying that what you experienced is what my children experienced too. It was March to March out, and then hybrid after that model. So Terry, how did responsive classroom strategies help your school this year?
It helped a great deal, because what we noticed is that kids did not have always that same sense of belonging that they would have had in the classroom. Kids who I never would have thought would have struggled to stay on camera or to stay online really, really struggled. And so we had our student services team really working overtime to make sure that kids had, those relationships with teachers. We ended up on Wednesdays, we had what we called a Wellness Wednesday. So we were not doing a lot of, we weren't doing any new teaching on Wednesdays. And it was all about the social and emotional. And our student services team stepped in then. But on Wednesdays, after we came back, we did a way back Wednesday. So kids would actually go to, because some kids had to change teachers. They came back, some had to change. So anyway, we went back to their original online classroom teacher morning meeting. And we did a lot of different things during morning meeting that we wouldn't have had to do before. So there was a lot of, okay, turn your camera on if so when warm wind blows kind of became turn your camera on if those kinds of things. So there were a lot of changes, and I cannot wait until August when we come back in person for real, still wearing a mask, but everybody will be in person. Everybody will be in a classroom.
I was lucky enough to be able to work with Terry's staff this school year, supporting them with trying to help them make the online learning engaging. And so we were able to do 3 little sessions together with bringing energizers and morning meeting and interactive learning structures to an online setting. And I was just so impressed with how open your teachers were and willing to try new things and try to make it work in this challenging setting.
And we appreciate it.
This year, there's been a lot of focus, and I hear a lot about learning loss, and of course we're worried, because it has been challenging and what have the students lost. But I'm interested in hearing about what gains you think that have happened this year. What gains have you observed because of these challenges? And you can think both gains for your educators and gains for your students. Jerome, would you mind starting us off on this conversation?
Sure. So I think Terry's already provided the answer for me, at least, when she mentioned how enthusiastic her kids were just to be back in the building. With that, I think the biggest gain for a lot of our kids was just a different level of appreciation for what it means to be in school, right? So they've gained this love of just belonging and the creation of community, and this thing they used to have to do all the time became an opportunity, right? Especially in our state, where I believe there's one other school in the state that was face-to-face. So every other school was virtual in some capacity, and some came back later on, a hybrid, et cetera. But the idea that they were in schools and others weren't, I think even at the first and second and third grade level, like there was some acknowledgement for that. So and again, going back to the fact that a lot of the connectedness outside of school was lost, they just had a newfound appreciation for what an organization, the school is as an organization, as an opportunity to flourish socially and emotionally. So getting to the academic part, it was very clear that sense of community, a sense of belonging, and the appreciation for being here drove their academic success as well. Because now they were all in, because now this thing that they have to do all the time had new meaning attached to it. And it was something that we were doing instead of just like I am doing. Hopefully we can find meaningful, tangible ways to bring some of those concepts forward, even outside of this pandemic, to continue to push that level of excitement just about being a part of a school.
Absolutely. Tina or Terry, would you like to add on to what learning gains you've seen?
Sure. So prior to the closure in March of 2020, we knew that one of our staff goals was just helping to enhance our culture. So Jerome, I'm jealous. I'm thinking, huddle and the Wednesday. I'm thinking, I want to go work with you. That's awesome.
We have openings.
Nice. So we knew that our own staff culture and how we, the adults, work together is so important, right? So we knew that was going to be one of our big initiatives for us to grow and continue to grow stronger together. And then comes this pandemic, and I'll tell you what, I don't know if it was because they had other things to fixate on and work on, but they got stronger and they leaned in on each other. So my teacher team, so I'm a 3-track school, so that means 3 first grades, 3 second grades, all the way through. Those teacher teams got really strong, and I think they needed to feel connected with each other, and they leaned in even more. So when you flip that into the academic side, in our professional learning community time and our time of being not only looking at the data, but just saying it is what it is, right? And we're just going to take them as far as we can go within the parameters of our day. And to take that pressure off too really helped. So it not only helped strengthen our culture of the staff, but honing in on what is really essential, that guaranteed curriculum that they were going to get as they moved on. And thinking back, what did they miss? But having that mindset, I think really helped people feel a little freer, saying, okay, they're coming in where they are, and it is what it is. I think the student behaviors, I was very surprised. So that I think the watching your distance and having the masks and everything, I was like, I think the kids were, again, worried and thinking so much about their distancing and everything. They didn't get close to each other to have a lot of other issues. So I was surprised about that part as well.
Terry, did you feel like you saw some gains with your teachers and or students?
Yes, and I would echo what Tina has said, much of what Tina has said. So my teachers really came together over all of this, and really, when we a lot of times will say all hands on deck, and they really did. They did not. They took that very seriously. I would think the other thing that we noticed is that kids really grew from the time we came back. They started to skyrocket. So it's that in-person connection that was super, super important. The other thing is that a lot of our parents found a little more compassion and a little more grace and understanding for teachers and what they go through, because they were at home with their kids. And so just a lot of mutual appreciation, I think.
Absolutely. I certainly, as I was listening to my daughter's teachers online, she's in high school, I'm like, just so impressed with every day that, I'd see that these teachers were looking at blank screens because they were high schoolers, and how they were still staying, working really hard to engage. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is really using this time as a reset of what are some of the normal, that hopefully next year is going to look more normal than this past year has. I mean, I assume we're going to still have some safety, a lot of safety that we're going to have to keep in mind. But what normal do you want to go back to? And what normal would you like to rethink and not go back to? So what are your thoughts around that? And Terry, would you mind starting us off with that conversation?
Sure. And in fact, we were just talking about this recently, is that one grade level in particular, because they're departmentalized, they're going to do a rotating morning meeting, especially at the beginning of the school, so that they can make sure they're building a relationship with each class. And they learned that through, or came to that thinking through being able to be in each other's classes, because when they came back in person and started the hybrid teaching, they were all still in their classrooms with their homeroom class. Then, the reading teacher was teaching reading to all of them, while the classroom, the other teachers were supporting, and math and science and so on. So they really wanted to build those strong relationships with kids at the very beginning of the year, which is a little harder to do in a departmentalized setting. So I really applaud them for doing that. And we also, at the end of this school year, we had 4 days of planning where we went through an entire 5-hour day. We did a little shorter, a 5-hour day of really reflecting on practices and what they wanted to keep, what they wanted to get rid of, but also thinking about, we did some vertical articulation between the teachers, and what does, kindergarten spoke to first grade, and first grade spoke to kindergarten and second grade, and where did the bulk of your kids get in the curriculum, so they could really see where they needed to start with most of the kids as far as what they needed. So I think just that conversation, keeping people talking, that's the big thing. We're also going to keep spritzing hands with hand sanitizer.
I think that might be with us for a while. Jerome, do you want to add to that?
Sure. So one of the things that I think a couple of us at least have mentioned is that family connection, and just the attentiveness to family needs, I think, has been heightened because, now we're in this business that none of us expected to be a literal life or death business, right? So it heightens just the awareness, the importance of communication. And I think that that's one of the things that we've done well this year, is to effectively communicate with families, and also to assure that that communication flows both ways. I think also this year has forced us to prioritize, even though it seems like something we do every year, prioritize like what is really best for the scholars right now. Like what, let's just take all the adulting out of the conversation and figure out, what's going to be the most effective, because time is so of the essence. And, we have to wrap everything around these health protocols. So it allowed us to really just allow some things to fall by the wayside that weren't as critical to our model, and allow conversation to be essential. Hopefully those are all things that carry on moving forward.
Thanks for sharing.
One thing we had tried before March of 2020 was Seesaw, which is just an online tool back and forth with parents. So trying to have that platform with parents to have that enhanced communication, because I agree, Jerome, we need to have that, not only us just giving them information, but that two-way, right? And not only is it feedback for their children's learning, but it's us sharing that information and getting to know them, as a family as well. So I think that using Seesaw really helped. The teachers got comfortable with it, and it just got to be such a great bonus for us that we will definitely continue that on. Also for us, it's using Zoom and teaching the parents and seeing these parents like, oh, I got this now. And for some of them with their work, they had to figure out Zoom. But for us to have IEP meetings and any kind of child study team meetings and those things, having that option of having parents just phone in or Zoom in, and you could see parents like adjusting the background and everything. And I was just like, wow, look at the learning, not only for us as the teaching staff, but the parents. So that's something we talked about too, is continuing on, even having future meetings, having that always as an option, because there is some proficiency now utilizing these online formats for any kind of meetings and parent teacher conferences and those sort of pieces as well. What I feel like turning the page to next school year is what a fantastic opportunity. Right. So we have had, how many times do we say it's so hard to retool and refocus and to take a cruise ship and turn it around, right? It's so hard, but now is our time. And I told the staff too, I said, this is our opportunity, that we have this beautiful gift. So at one of my, I think it was the April staff meeting. So we did it in a Zoom format. One thing I did with staff meetings is I would pre-record myself, because I love Flipgrid. So I did 10 minutes of the nuts and bolts. I'd send it out to them a few days ahead of time. And I just said, please watch this whenever you want to, 9 o'clock at night, whatever, and watch it prior to the staff meeting. And then the staff meeting either was on a Zoom format or we were spaced in the cafeteria. So in the April staff meeting, it just happened to be a Zoom format, and I had them get into breakout rooms, and I said, what's our stop doing list and what is our continue list? So I gathered that information from all staff members, all the stakeholders, and then we started using that information to start planning for this upcoming year as well.
You mentioned like the new norms in the Zoom. One of the things that, again, I'm new to all of this, right? So I don't have a lot of benchmarks and points of comparison, but just the extent to which our alarm system, I'm in the building and it automatically arms at this time. So I apologize for the beeping, but it is normalized, this Zoom environment, right? So we talked about the importance of having that back and forth communication with families. It doesn't have to be this big thing now where it's like a town hall or everyone has to come to the school. We can send out an email and say, hey, I'm jumping on a call this Thursday night with the whole school, right? And everyone just come on and we can have this dialogue and have this conversation. And just for that to be, the first time, we had a few staff members that say like, you're going to have everyone there? That's going to be crazy. And then you have all, we had some with 120 different participants and like we survived. And it's like, wow, okay, this can be a new norm moving forward, that our communication with families does not have to be as formal as it used to be.
I really appreciate the idea of thinking about keeping Zoom as an option for meeting with parents, because as we know, all parents are care about their children and are doing the best they can. And it's hard to get off of work and get to school, and to have Zoom as an opportunity to be able to stay at work and or in the evening in Zoom if after work, or to be able to connect with families.
Our parents are asking us to keep Zoom as an option for meetings, and so are our teachers, quite frankly.
Sure. I think it's just accommodating more families' needs.
Yeah.
So this year, what has this past year taught you about leadership?
Well, I'll start off with this one, and I'll tell you what, energy, and even when you feel tired and we are tired, I, as the leader, I needed to bring that positivity, and that's just kind of in my nature and my being. But to have that energy to keep the kids going, and I would have Mrs. Miller joke comedy hour. I'd go around the lunchroom and I'd have my microphone and it'd be like, okay, tell some jokes. So that went over into my morning messages, and the kids would submit jokes and I'd share it. So having that idea of belonging and significance and fun, right? So I talked about our word of the year, empathy, but for me, my personal word was joy, that we need to find, even in the tough times, I needed to find the joy. And the staff knew that. They had got me this little wooden plaque that said joy, and I'd bring it up all the time. Like, how are we doing this? Because teaching is tough. It's such a hard job, and leading teachers is even tougher. Right. And so we need to have those moments of joy, and find out how we can keep rejuvenating ourselves as well. I think what else it taught me was being flexible, that I really needed to say, okay, what's big here? Don't sweat the small stuff, and what's the big things. And I just feel like the staff, like, oh, okay, that we're going to have this staff meeting in a different format, that they don't have to be there right at 3:45 on the first Thursday of the month, that we can do this in a little bit of a different format as well. And then trust and assume positive intent. That's one of when we do our adult guidelines, we want to have open, honest communication with each other, but have that, positive intent, that no one's there to be malicious. We're all doing our best, right? And trust that with each other. So that's been really powerful for my year in learning as a leader.
I think for me, my word would be listening, because there were so many things, so many times in this last year that we had to pivot from one thing to another at the very last minute. We had, directives on how this would work or that would work. But then just knowing that I didn't have to do this all by myself. So listening to the other adults, listening to parents, listening to students, because students have great things to say too, and suggestions on how to do things. So we did a lot of listening this year.
So many things came through my mind. I tried to jot some of them down as both of you were talking. Tina, you mentioned, well, maybe indirectly, what I heard from you is your staff took their cues from you. And I think that became even more essential as a leader, if you will, than it may be in previous years. Like, the leadership part of being a school leader, right? It's not just assigning classes and making sure everyone's doing this and that, but like setting the tone in an effective, definitive way for your learning community has been like the essence of my job. It's been like 99% of it, the extent that, folks are looking to you to say, like, are we okay? All right. And for you to be able to say, yes, we're okay, and here's why. That I think has brought that leadership part of the job back to the forefront. And that's very exciting, because what that allows you to do is it allows you to start to shape your school culture, and not just prioritize your academics solely without that social, emotional, and connection components. You talked about listening, Terry, and then there was a question, actually, I wanted to tie this to, it disappeared. There was a question about, and maybe Kristen can help me, but I think it was a question about us the Zoom format not being personal enough. Am I capturing the essence of that question that popped up, Kristen?
Yeah, you're right. It's about helping parents connect with each other. So I think Zoom is helping for parents connecting with teachers, but trying to foster that interconnection between families,
Right.
other than breakout rooms or something like that.
Right. So I don't know if this took it that far, but what I thought of when I saw that question and I heard Terry talking about listening was part of why that, and for us it was Google Meet, but part of why that online platform was so effective is because it became informal. I think families saw a different level of authenticity, perhaps a different level of transparency. You know, we didn't just come on and say, now here's what we're going to do. And it's like, look, guys, this is crazy. And, you know, and it just, we worked through this together in such a real way that I think that it fostered this relationship between us and then even between families that were on the calls, because we unmuted. You know, it wasn't a speech. It was families talking to us, families talking to each other. And I think that created this space to where there was so much commonality in what we were going through. One last thing I'll throw in there, when you talk about what we're going to bring forward, I always think about how much, like, we all have stuff, right? As humans, we all have things that we're going through. What this pandemic did is that it gave a level of commonality for all of our stuff. We all had the same trauma from the same root cause. And I think what that allowed us to do is to have a different level of empathy and a different level of grace, right, for each other, because like we're all feeling it. It's not like, what's wrong with you? It's like, what's wrong with you is the same thing's wrong with me. It's like, okay. So I think that just made it easier for us to relate to each other. So building off of that moving forward in terms of what I hope we keep that same level of grace. The fact, you know, from little things to what's in your background on these Zoom calls, or when someone says, you know, I have a family situation, when you have teachers who are out due to COVID symptoms, or because of a child who's sick, or, you know, the babysitter is now in quarantine. Like, we've all dealt with these things, and it's like, go take care of your family. Go take care of your family. I don't know if I heard go take care of your family as much in prior years as I did in this year. And so we prioritized the human experience this year. And guess what? Like, we survived, and we still had academics results that were stellar, right? So moving forward, like, there's this premise of like, we can still see each other in meaningful ways, all the ways that are laid out in Responsive Classroom, all the things that we're told to prioritize. These things work. So moving forward, let's keep that same level of grace, same level of transparency, same level of authenticity. And then all that's just going to catapult, you know, I mean, the trajectory for our academic success will be fantastic.
Thank you for that, Jerome. Hearing from all of you the importance of thinking about all the levels of who you serve, about making sure that your students feel safe physically, emotionally, and cognitively, and that they feel belonging and significance. And then I'm hearing about, you know, what you're thinking about the importance of the adult community, how we work together as being so important in nurturing that adult community, because healthy teachers make healthy students. And then the nurturing of the families and connecting with the families and honoring and respecting. And I do feel like I've seen that this year has been able to help us heighten those three areas.
For sure.
Kristen, were there any additional questions?
No, I haven't seen anything else come through. Oh, here's one right now. Thank you, Laura. So how has your role leading at school affected your family life? I feel like this pandemic has affected all of our lives in terms of homework, everything. Anyone have anything to share?
My husband keeps telling me, this has not changed. He keeps telling me to turn off the computer.
Is it your husband's your healthy accountability partner, helping you stay healthy?
Exactly.
for our family. So I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. Okay. So in our district, we were in-person elementary, but our secondary schools were on cohorts, a Monday, Tuesday, and a Thursday, Friday, with a Wellness Wednesday as well. And they, by design, wanted to be at school on separate days. And my husband ended up working at home too. So it was a whole new shift for us as a family. And we had to sit down and talk about not only what are we doing to stay healthy and what happens if one of us, because with me being in school 5 days a week, more than likely, I was going to be exposed more so than the others. So that was just trying to have those honest communication, with us as a family structure too, and trying to think differently. But one of the things that I did notice is we didn't have as many activities after school. I didn't have as many PTC events. So I found myself, after about 5 o'clock, I was able to come home and we were able to have that, those shared meal times as well. So as I think looking ahead, how do I help create that balance again when I want to engage with parents and we want parents in the building, but yet we need to have a balance with our own families too.
So as you were talking, I was trying in my head to think through, how do I answer this question without it turning into a personal counseling session? Um, so it was hard. It was hard, just to be completely, as I talked about earlier, transparent. It was really hard. I feel like I cheat a little bit here because my wife works in the building. I'm the founder and president. She's the co-founder and vice president. So, a lot of our time was spent here, but a lot of our time was also spent lamenting the fact that we have a 9, 11, and 9-year-old who are not seeing us at the level that they used to. Because again, this is our inaugural year, and in this inaugural year, we've been placed into this life or death situation with 200 tiny humans that we've been asked to be responsible for. So it was challenging. So the takeaway from that, in terms of what others can glean from it, is be in tune with your own mental health. Be okay. One of the things that I think maybe changed in our house as a couple is the willingness, at least on my part, to say, like, I'm not okay. Like, I'm not okay. This is rough and this is crazy and I'm having anxiety and I feel a little depressed right now and like, I'm not okay, right? So to be able to not have to, earlier I talked about that leadership need in the building, right? And that they look to you for that. To be able to decompress at home and to be able to find your solace in someone else, or whether it's family or friends or a counselor, or medication, whether it's depression or anxiety, just take care of yourself, whatever that looks like. And not only does it help you personally, but it also puts you in a position to, walk your talk. Right? If we're all here talking about responsive classroom and prioritizing social, emotional, and mental well-being, it starts with us as leaders. And it starts with us being vulnerable to those who we can be vulnerable with, maybe not in the building, but also being okay with addressing our own personal mental health needs.
Thank you for sharing that, George.
Powerful.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And that makes me think about how I just said that healthy teachers make healthy students,
Right.
healthy leaders make healthy teachers and healthy
Absolutely.
students. And
Absolutely.
so we have to take care of ourselves as leaders. I am so grateful to the three of you for taking this time and being so honest and open and sharing your experiences. I'm so grateful that you're in education and that you're partnering with Responsive Classroom to make the schools the way you want it to be. I think this was a really thoughtful sharing of your experiences, and I'm sure the participants who were with us tonight and benefited from hearing your experiences. And this, as Kristen said, this is recorded and will be on our website. So I know future educators will be able to, leaders will be able to see it and learn from you. So thank you. Thank you so much for those of you who joined us tonight. I'm sure you appreciated it as much as I did. Thank you, Kristen, for supporting us too. So you all have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourself. hopefully to have some time this summer to nurture yourself to be ready for that next school year.
Indeed.
thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Carrie.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Carrie.
Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome. Take care. Good
Bye-bye.
luck, everyone,
Bye-bye.
finishing up school.
Good luck to everyone.